And joining us on the line right now is Jennifer Griffin, national security correspondent, Pentagon correspondent for your Fox News channel. Thought a good day to have her here to talk about the president's visit to the Pentagon yesterday, where he said, among other things,
ideologies are not defeated with guns. They're defeated by better ideas, a more attractive and more compelling vision.
And we'll take your calls on that in just a moment, but we wanted to talk to Jennifer first and get a sense of how it went yesterday. Jennifer, good morning.
Good morning, Brian. Good morning, Larry.
I'm sort of curious because I'm wondering how much the Pentagon brass, how much freedom do they really have to tell the president what they think the right strategy is? Are they in agreement with what the president said yesterday, or is this just what has been negotiated because they know this is far as the president will go?
Well, it's interesting, Brian. The president said that he requested blunt talk from his 30 or so national security advisors. He had flown in the head of CENTCOM, the head of SOCOM, Special Operations Command. He had standing behind him, quite notably, the head of Africa Command, who had flown over from Europe. That's significant because the president admitted for the first time that ISIS has now spread quite dramatically into Africa and into Libya in particular, as well as into the Sinai. So on the one hand, he made this dramatic show of coming over to the Pentagon. He hadn't been there since October. He doesn't come over often. It's a rare appearance. He called in all of his national security advisors. At first, we were told by the White House he wasn't going to take questions. Then he surprised people by taking two questions quickly at the end. But it was basically an update statement. It was for the appearance itself was for the optics of that after a 4th of July weekend where there had been numerous terror threats that had the nation on edge at their 4th of July celebrations. He's there, Commander-in-Chief at the Pentagon, but we didn't hear any single new idea of what he planned to do. The one thing he said he had told his team that he wanted them to do was to increase the training in Syria. Well, remember, they passed in the fall, the Congress passed $500 million to train 5,400 Syrian opposition fighters, and recently the Pentagon said they'd only trained 100 fighters in Syria. Now, that's not going to make a difference in this fight against ISIS.
All right, so let me just follow up if I can, because, you're right, the optics were for a reason. You wanted to leave the impression everybody's on the same page here. But you talk to these generals. You walk those halls at the Pentagon. You have off-the-record conversations. And I don't want you to share anything that's off the record, but can you tell me, is everybody on the same page here, or do some people believe there is a different strategy that should be followed?
Well, I would say, first of all, no, I wouldn't say everybody's on the same page. I believe there's a great deal of frustration. The officials that I talk to, the commanders that I talk to, the people who are out fighting that I talk to, there is a great deal of frustration. Now, is it frustration simply that the White House won't let them do what they think they should be doing at this point in time? Or is it frustration that after 13 years of fighting the same war in different formats and in different, it's sort of like Groundhog Day in Iraq, there's a great deal of frustration that they have tried many, many different options and strategies and tactics for how to deal. Tactically, they know how to deal with this ISIS threat. Tactically, they're brilliant at sending a drone and taking out top leadership wherever they are in the world. Tactically, they do very well. The problem is strategically, and this is what you heard the president say yesterday, is strategically this is not adding up to a containment or a destruction of ISIS. What we're seeing is ISIS, and whether it was Al-Qaeda before that, metastasize around the world, and seeing it crop up in Libya, in Nigeria, in Sinai. That is a problem in the sense that, and now we're hearing Afghanistan, where we're supposed to be drawing troops down. You had Senator McCain there over the weekend, and what you're hearing is that now ISIS is starting to plant its flag in Afghanistan. So it's not just Taliban there, it's not just Al-Qaeda there, it's now ISIS. And we have 10,000 troops in Afghanistan. The president doesn't, I would say that the White House and even the Pentagon doesn't talk enough about how we have 10,000 troops in Afghanistan, and they're all supposed to be out by the end of the year. And the question is, how are you going to deal with the this metastasizing Islamic extremism, because right now there are successes in the Syrian theater and in the Iraqi theater in terms of containing this. If you listen to the Pentagon planners, they say that ISIS has lost 25% of the ground that it had a year ago. That's significant, but they've also made some gains. They've taken over Ramadi in the heart of Anbar. The Pentagon is finding that the Iraqis are not significant partners in terms of their troops on the ground, are still not willing to fight, and when they are willing to fight, it's the Shia militias that are doing most of the fighting. So we're basically serving as the Air Force for a sectarian conflict at this point in time.
Our guest is Jennifer Griffin, national security correspondent for Fox News Channel. And Jennifer, I watched the president's remarks yesterday, and it appeared like a big thrust of his focus has to do with the social media campaign. You know, fighting against the gains that ISIS has in on the internet and in recruiting. But what didn't seem like a big part of a military discussion, considering the setting was the Pentagon. I mean, at the foreignpolicy.com, at the Cable, which is an influential blog page over at Foreign Policy, they had some pretty important questions, like why aren't we relentlessly bombing the jihadi strongholds? We know where they exist, we know where they are, but we keep doing these pinprick drone operations. Yeah. Is anyone raising that question?
Well, what's very interesting is if you look at the airstrikes that took place on July 4th, and they were carefully timed, I would point out, the capital of the self-declared Islamic State, ISIS, is Raqqa in Syria, eastern Syria. And at 7 p.m. Eastern, as Americans were standing on the Capitol waiting for the fireworks to mark the 4th of July, 16 airstrikes were launched into Raqqa. That was the largest number of airstrikes to hit the capital of the Islamic State since this set of airstrikes began nearly a year ago. That was symbolic, but my question to the military planners, who were very proud of this sort of symbolic strike on Saturday, is why is that not happening every night? Yeah. Why is Raqqa still standing in terms of a capital, a physical capital for this so-called Islamic State? Now, the warplanes and the aircraft that have been flying in the north of Syria have made incredible gains with the help of the Kurds who have been on the ground. They overtook a town called Tel Abyad, which was the main funnel for foreign fighters in through Turkey. The Kurds have gotten within 30 miles of Raqqa. So the U.S. Air Force does very well, and the coalition aircraft do very well when they have someone on the ground that they're backing up. And right now, the only effective fighting force that has been on the ground that's made any gains have been the Kurds, and yet Washington's been very concerned about backing the Kurds and not going through Baghdad.
Well, and to that point, Jennifer Griffin, 2 days after those airstrikes on Raqqa, 16 airstrikes, you're right, but many military professionals will say that isn't a whole lot of airstrikes. It's, as you said, symbolic. 2 days later, yesterday afternoon, Reuters is reporting that the Islamic State actually stormed a town right outside of Raqqa and pushed the Kurdish-led forces back out of that town. So they're actually gaining ground against the Kurds 2 days after the airstrikes. It looks like symbolism over strategy.
Yeah. It didn't destroy them, and it is like a game of cat and mouse at this point in time. So very frustrating. You were right to point out social media is what has law enforcement and the national security establishment totally on its heels, because ISIS has been owning the Twitter, Facebook, and social media recruiting efforts. And the fact that there are still hundreds of recruits going from Europe, from comfortable middle-class lifestyles in the U.S. and Europe to go and join them in Syria, that is a big problem for the world, frankly.
We got to leave it right there. Jennifer Griffin, thanks, always Jennifer. A pleasure. Great download. I appreciate the appearance here this morning.
Thank you both.